Welcome back, it's me, Lou. I'm here for another action figure unboxing and review, and today we are featuring from the DC Multiverse by McFarlane Toys. We have Batman, the Dark Detective. Okay, so this is a little bit backwards. So a few videos back, I reviewed this guy, Batman, the Dark Detective, but this was the gold label figure. Generally, the gold label figure is usually the second release. This is the first release of the figure. I actually saw this figure a few months ago at my local mall at FYE, but I passed up on it. And then last week I came across the gold label figure at my local Target. And since I passed up on this guy the first time, I'm like, I'll just pick this one up. It looks great. Also, one of my viewers, Morky Moose, he suggested that I check out the Dark Detective figure. But I think the figure he was recommending was the first version, which is this guy here. I think I bought this guy on Amazon. I think he was on sale. Maybe for like, I want to say $12 or $13, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that. I think that was one of the reasons why I pulled the trigger on it, because it was marked down. So yeah, we looked at this guy, but today we're going to take a look at the first version. And we can even do a slight comparison afterwards also. Okay, so we have the Dark Detective. Much like I said in the previous video, I am unfamiliar with this character. He spawns out of the DC Future State series of books and storyline. So I don't really know anything about him. The design of this version of Batman kind of reminds me of Nightmare Batman from the Snyderverse live action movies, you know, that he gave us, like Superman and Justice League and stuff like that. And then there's those flash forward sequences with Batman. He's also called Nightmare Batman. He's wearing the leather duster, and he's like kind of like in a post-apocalyptic world. That kind of reminds me of this design. Right, so we have the figure, the grappling hook, trading card in the back, action figure stand. And on the back, we have a nice action photo of the action figure. And it's kind of cool because on the gold label version, you kind of get a similar pose, but you don't get action figure photography. You just get like an actual like illustration. Whereas the first release, you got fig photography here. Some other figures that are out, there's the Three Jokers Joker. There's I think that's I can't read this, text is so small. Curse of the White Knight Batman. And it looks like this figure here might be the same figure that we got in the 2-pack with Azrael. We have Hazmat Batman, and there's two versions of this. There's the gold label, I think it's a Target exclusive, where his chest actually lights up. And then there's the first release where it doesn't do anything. We have Superman, I think this is Rebirth Superman. And then we have the variant on Swamp Thing with the horns. Okay, let's take out the Dark Detective. It's a cool looking figure. Alright, so the reason why I passed up on it the first time is that the McFarlane line of toys, I'm a big fan of everything they do. I think, not that their figures are flawless, you know, every now and then, you know, there's little discrepancies like in color inaccuracies and whatnot, but for the most part, I think McFarlane, I think they put out probably the best action figures on the market. The engineering is second to none, and they're affordable. You know, you're getting like a 7-inch scale action figure, multiple points of articulation, incredible paint jobs, and the sculpting is always just superb. But at the time, when I passed up on this guy, I want to say it was around the time when they released the Endless Winter line of figures. And I was just kind of burnt out. I kind of felt like there was too much coming out too fast. And I'm not necessarily a completionist. I just buy stuff that looks cool, or stuff that, you know, I might be familiar with the actual comic book or the story, or if it's something aesthetically that I'm attracted to, I'll pick it up. But there's a period of time during COVID where, man, it seemed like there was new McFarlane figures like every week, and they all looked amazing, and it's kind of like I want them all. And then it got to a point where I'm like, I have no room for these. I'm a little bit burned out, and truth is, I actually sold some of the figures. So some of the figures that I've reviewed, I actually sold, And then in my crazy head, you know, like 6 months later, I've regretted it, and I'm hunting down some of these figures again. It's stupid. But in the case of this, I kind of regret that I passed up on it. It looks great. If you're a customizer, I think there's a lot of usable pieces here to make some really interesting customs. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to check out this first version, because I'm seeing like 5 different figures I could create from this base body alone. And we might actually tackle that in the near future. Right off the bat, this figure looks incredible in the tray. The bat emblem is kind of faint. It's like a light yellow over the gray armor. I kind of feel like this should have been like maybe a darker shade of yellow or a darker shade of gray, just to give it a little bit more contrast, because the emblem is kind of hard to see. One thing that looks weird with this figure, I was comparing the second release to the concept art, and in the concept art, his color scheme was a little bit more uniform. Like his slacks and his armor were kind of like a dark gray. You know, this one here, it's kind of disjointed. He kind of has like a light olive pants versus the gray top. And then there's a lot of disconnect here with the hands, which I don't understand. He has like a black forearm gauntlet, but then his gloves are blue. It looks kind of off. But then again, I think this might be a callback to like the OG, like really OG version of Batman, where he had like, I think, purple gloves. All right, let's take this guy out. I'm annoyed that these figures have so much plastic ties holding them in. You know, like for some figures, they'll just like tie it around the waist, and that's cool. I could deal with that. But then there's figures like this where they feel it necessary to tie down every arm, every leg, and it's kind of annoying. So let's get that taken care of. Alright, so we have Batman the Dark Detective as seen in the Future State comic books. Now don't ask me what Future State is. After the end of the Joker War in Batman, I kind of like dropped out of the books. And then, I don't know, I kind of felt like they were really changing up the status quo, and I kind of enjoyed the previous status quo. I didn't really feel the need to like, like attach myself to new characters. So let's get started. I'm loving this figure a lot so far. So Morky Moose, if you're watching this, thank you again for the suggestion. This is a great looking action figure. Let's see, height wise, this guy stands in at a little over 7 inches, 7¼ if you count the horns. Beautiful sculpting. You know, I say this all the time with the McFarlane figures. You capture some of these figures in the right lighting conditions, and man, their faces just come to life. Really well done. The jacket's is really well done also. Realistic folds throughout. There's some light dry brushing over the coat also. As you can see, it's almost like a very faint gray brown. It kind of makes the jacket look a little bit worn, a little bit distressed, adds some realism to it. I kind of wish they'd do the same for the body armor. The body armor is like, in Star Wars terms, it's a shiny. It doesn't look like it's seen any battle damage. The belt looks awesome. Lots of detail. You get pouches. He has like a lasso. A couple of canisters, or maybe like flash bombs. I don't think any of these holsters are functional. It doesn't look like you can store any weapon in them. The coat's kind of made of a... It's not that thin of a material like some of the capes we've gotten recently. But it's not too thick either. It's kind of like a nice in-between. It's a little stiff in certain areas, especially where the folds are kind of billowed up. but it's kind of posed dynamically, and I see this all the time. I kind of prefer it if the coats and capes were in a neutral pose, but you know, it adds some life to the character, especially if you're like into action figure photography. The armor looks great. You know, it's the leg design, especially the lower leg, is very similar to the Batman villain Hush with the knee pads and the shin guards. Articulation, this guy's head rotates. He doesn't look down all that much. Look up about there. If he has a torso cut, I think it's underneath all this armor. And he's not going to want to crunch forward. No, he does. I take it back. Crunches forward about there, which is impressive. He can arch back, but due to the nature of the jacket here, he's only going to go so far. You can kind of see the inner workings inside. A lot of the McFarlane figures, one thing I'll give them credit for is that there's a lot of like interchangeability with parts. Like if you're a customizer, a lot of these figures, they come apart very easily. It's not like a Marvel Legends where you kind of need like crack open the torso. For McFarlane figures, you just need to throw these things into like a hot pot of water, and then once the plastic softens up, you just like start pulling stuff away. And a lot of the times you'll find that a lot of these figures share similar sockets and joints. So if you're a customizer, there's like a lot of possibilities. Like if you wanted to, you could easily pop this guy's head off and swap it with a different Batman head if you wanted to. So, you know, I really applaud McFarlane there. I think their action figure engineering is just really spot on. This guy rotates at the waist. He kind of like rocks side to side. Arms rotate. And it's nice because they're smart enough to know to attach the shoulder pad to the upper part of the arm, not the top of the shoulder. And since this is a softer plastic and it's not attached to the coat, you can rotate it without it like sticking, which is brilliant. There is a bicep cut, I believe, right there. But the motion's kind of hindered because it's a broad bicep, and when you try to turn it in or out, it just ends up hitting the coat. Double jointed elbows. You have, I think, one pin exposed. The other is hidden, I think, by the gauntlet. Wrist articulation right up here. Legs kick out about that much. Kick out this way. Double jointed knees, really large pins exposed. Articulated ankle. I like the boot design a lot too. It covers up the ankle and it covers up that ball joint that I always hate. Toe articulation. Yeah, much like all the other McFarlane figures, he kind of has that rubbery diaper here over the crotch. Alright, so let's compare this guy to the second release, which is the gold label figure here. Now, for the most part, I think the only thing different is that you're getting different arms, or different upper arms, and a lack of a coat. So I don't really think you go fault McFarlane for double dipping. You know, think of it more like an option. I know sometimes I complain that some of these gold label figures is kind of like a easy cash grab, or it feels like they're playing dirty, especially when all they do is give you like a head swap. Because, you know, it's like for other toy lines like WWE or Marvel Legends, the alternate head's an accessory. You know, they can easily do that with McFarlane, but I kind of feel like that since the level of engineering and the production and the quality of the figure is so high, maybe that's why they're kind of sparse on the accessories sometimes. But for the most part, it looks like you're getting the same figure. You know, the only thing different, like I said, is that this guy is absent the coat and he has different arms. But for the most part, they both have identical heads, I believe. The body armor is the same, the belt. The colors are all the same. There's no color variation. So it really depends on you, you know, which figure you want. You know, not having read the comic book, I can't tell you which one's the much more preferred version. You know, I don't know in the comic book which look is more dominant. You know, I don't know if he wears the coat more often in the comic book than going without the coat. But either way, I think they're both excellent figures. If you had to choose one, without having a bias towards the comic, I'd suggest get the gold label one. Just because, as much as I love the coat, I think if you're into action figure photography or poses, not having the coat makes this guy a lot more accessible in terms of the poses you could give him. You know, the coat here, it looks great, but it's kind of a hindrance. But it still looks fantastic. If you can afford both figures, get both figures. But if you can only afford one, go for the gold label figure right here on the right. If I had to rate this guy here on a scale of 1 to 10, easy 8 to 8.5. It looks great. If you're a customizer, lots of interesting pieces going on here. So, you know, don't sleep on this figure. I think this guy is a hit. It's really well done. Now, with the McFarlane line of toys, especially with Multiverse, they produce so many different variations of Batman. You know, if you're all about the iconic look of Batman and you just want Batman in his spandex and whatnot, you know, that's cool. But every now and then I feel that there's a certain version of Batman that comes out that's worth exploring, even if you're not familiar with that version of the character. And I think this is a good example of that. You know, even if you're not unfamiliar with the Future State series of comic books, I think this is a very unique look for Batman. You know, it's not Batman in a cape and spandex. I love the idea of the body armor. The jacket looks great. You know, everything about this figure is really quality. And I think it's a figure that if you see, you know, consider picking it up. It's really well worth the purchase. Alright, so let's wrap this video up. Once again, my name is Lou. If you are new to my channel, welcome. If you are a returning subscriber or viewer, thank you so much for your continued support. So, until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I'll see you at the next one. Alright, later.